It all starts in 1982, in Northern England. Here we meet little Robert Williams, who is with his friends, ready to play. Robert is the last one picked for one of the teams, but he doesn't mind, and with great joy, he takes the position of goalkeeper. Unfortunately, he doesn't save any balls, which leads his friends to tease him. Only his friend Nate feels sorry for him and helps him up, a situation that makes Robert sad as he heads home with his head down. Even though he knows he's not good at football, he's sure he's destined for something big. At home, Robert lives with his mother, his grandmother, and his father, Peter, a man who considers himself a star and loves to imitate his favorite singers. Little Robert shares the same interests, and together they put on quite a show at home. While watching TV closely, his father tells him that you're born with talent, and if you don't have it, you're considered a nobody. Harsh words that stick with our protagonist. As they continue their performance, Robert trips over the antenna, which angers his father greatly. To prevent him from being scolded further, his grandmother takes him to have a bath. There, Robert shares his fear of being born without talent, as he doesn't want to be a nobody. Betty, with much love, reassures him that he has plenty of talent, but what matters most is what's in his heart. At 9 years old, Robert has his first public performance. For a moment, his fear of embarrassing himself takes over. He even makes an awkward entrance on stage, which he resolves sarcastically, winning the audience's affection. However, this isn't enough for him, as his father's seat is empty, which makes him sad and reinforces his feelings of being a nobody. Speaking of his father, he was at a bar performing and making some money. Shortly after, Peter decides to leave his family and even changes his last name, which breaks Robert's heart and creates more insecurities within him. Following this, his mother decides to throw out Peter's belongings. Our protagonist, seeing this, decides to salvage a Coleman jacket that his father used to wear, wanting to keep them now that they're moving to a new home. Now, at 15, Robert is clear that he wants to be a famous singer. He's even written some songs. When his teacher reviews his lyrics, he brings him back to reality with these harsh words: "They won't change your mind." He practices constantly with his friend Nate. One morning, while preparing for his mandatory school exams, he hears on the radio that there will be auditions for a youth band. This excites him greatly, as he believes it's the opportunity he's been waiting for. Without thinking twice, he decides to audition. Nervous, Robert presents himself to a music director named Nell. Although his singing and performance aren't what was expected due to his insecurities, Robert still shows personality in the face of criticism. When he returns home, Robert eagerly awaits Nell's call, as he doesn't lose hope of being chosen. Despite his grandmother trying to lift his spirits, Robert goes to his room feeling frustrated, leaving the phone behind. At that moment, he receives a call, but it's not from the music director, it's from his father, who, after years of absence, wants to see him and invites him to one of his shows. This news fills our protagonist with happiness. After a short visit with his father, who doesn't seem interested in helping him, Robert returns home to tell his mother that he failed his exams. However, before he can say anything, she gives him the good news that he was chosen for the pop band he auditioned for, making Robert burst with joy and never mentioning his failed exams. Now, as a new member, Nell introduces Robert to his new bandmates, Jason, Howard, Mark, and finally Gary, a guy who will be a rival for our protagonist because he has an angelic voice. Although Robert isn't great at dancing, something he wants to take advantage of, he knows that even if he doesn't get all the fame for himself, it's better than having nothing. During a dinner with Nell, he gives them some guidelines on what story they should present to the public. He also makes it clear that Gary will take the credit for songwriting and gives our protagonist the stage name Roby, a name he doesn't initially like. Before wrapping up the scene, the director reveals that the band will be called Take That. With their launch, the band first performs in more inclusive nightclubs, as Nell's initial plan is for the band to thrive in this kind of environment, a place where they can gain a lot of popularity. This pleases Roby, as he feels it's a welcoming and non-judgmental atmosphere. For 18 months, they have 2 performances each night, but then the perspective starts to change. One night, they are taken to a club full of girls, where they are also very well received. While performing, Roby freezes for a moment. This is because, among the crowd, he sees a version of his past that reminds him he's a failure. Still, Roby continues with the show. In the midst of a celebration with the band, Nell gives them the good news that several record labels in London are interested in them. The director congratulates everyone except Roby, whom he accuses of speaking with a local journalist without his permission. Seeing his attitude, no one threatens him with finding another bastard like him to replace him. After the reprimand, he announces that girls will be coming up to the stage, but they are forbidden to touch them or have any contact with them, as he wants the boys in the band to appear unattainable. In addition to their performances, the guys go on a tour giving talks about safe relationships. Roby takes all this information to heart, pretending to be Gary and doing everything he can to avoid being discovered. The owner of a record label gives them the opportunity to sign, all because his daughter asked him to. To the band's surprise, it turns out to be the same girl Robbie had hooked up with while pretending to be his bandmate. After the meeting, the band celebrates with a dance, and from that moment on, their career starts to take off. Even the fans don't leave Robbie's house, which creates a chaotic situation that his mother isn't too happy about, as she can no longer work in peace. In light of this, Robbie suggests they move since he'll be making a lot of money, but for his mom, leaving their home isn't an option. On the other hand, his grandmother Betty feels worried and sad for Robbie, as she thinks he has changed too much and that fame has consumed him. However, for our protagonist, this isn't a bad thing. On the contrary, he's now an unstoppable pop star. After several successes with the band, Nell is interviewed and proudly shows off all the group's merchandise. Meanwhile, Robbie, who is busy composing, is interrupted by Gary, who asks to see what he's been writing. Defensive, Robbie asks if he'll get credit for it, which angers Gary, who makes it clear that his name will never appear alongside Robbie's. The work environment on set becomes increasingly uncomfortable, Robbie's insecurities grow more frequent, and depression starts to consume him, leading him to seek refuge in alcohol. His father, who is passing through town, visits Robbie now that he's famous. Our protagonist tries to open up, telling him that he feels overwhelmed and doesn't even know who he is anymore. His father finds this ridiculous, claiming that thanks to Gary's talent, Robbie is living the dream that anyone in his position would want, words that are certainly not helpful. During one of his performances, Robbie shows up almost unconscious. Still, they go on stage at Nell's command. While his bandmates perform, Robbie pulls himself together and continues with the show. During a costume change, his bandmates confront him about how he showed up, especially Gary, who makes it clear that his role in the band is just to dance and sing backup. Very upset, Robbie returns to the stage, forgetting his microphone and taking it from Gary to keep the show going, something that doesn't sit well with Nell, who has always looked down on Robbie. Following this incident, the band decides to leave him behind and continue as a quartet. Robbie doesn't leave angry about the decision his bandmates made. Instead, he grabs a watermelon before heading out. Once in his car, as he tries to start it, he sees Nell laughing at him, which makes him furious and drives off at high speed while singing. The announcement of his departure from the band comes quickly, and his reputation starts to decline, as by the age of 21, he has become a full-blown alcoholic. Although he is aware of this, he also knows he's willing to compete and rise again as a solo artist, as his desire for revenge gives him the energy he needs to show the world what he can achieve on his own. On New Year's Eve, Robbie meets Nicole, a famous artist from a popular band called LSS, whom he doesn't recognize at first because of the mask she's wearing. After a conversation where Robbie shares his experiences with the band he was in and his aspirations to become a big star, they connect really well and even create a song together and dance. At that moment, their relationship goes public, and the couple is inseparable. When Nicole becomes pregnant, their happiness grows even more, but soon everything falls apart as she loses the baby. While attending a party, Nicole and her group receive the news that one of their songs has hit #1 worldwide. Robbie, who feels sad deep down, tries to show that he's happy for his girlfriend. In the middle of the celebration, while Nicole is giving her thanks, Robbie disappears to go after Liam Gallagher, the lead singer of Oasis, whom he admires, but his presence only leads to mockery from Liam. Later, Robbie is invited to hang out with them. When he returns home, our protagonist, who has been drinking, belittles his girlfriend's song success, leading to an argument between the couple. The next day, Robbie visits his mother's house, where he can't stop complaining that everyone has a #1 song except him. His mother scolds him and reminds him that he should visit them more often since his grandmother has been getting sick. Robbie thinks his mom is exaggerating and claims he can't because he has an important meeting with a producer. At that moment, his grandmother interrupts them and, due to her memory loss, reveals that in the past, she forced his father to reconnect with Robbie, a painful truth for him. After meeting with his producer, he dismisses Robbie's initial proposals and believes what Robbie wrote would be better suited for a band looking for a more meaningful song. Robbie searches through his notebook and finds a good idea that the producer helps him improve and bring to life. With the help of his manager Chris, Robbie is invited to a radio station, allowing his song to skyrocket and achieve one success after another in his career: national tours, platinum albums, concerts, and much more. As his fame rises, his addiction to drugs and alcohol also becomes more frequent. Even his hallucinations of his past selves become more recurrent, all accompanied by panic attacks and anxiety. At the end of one of his concerts, Chris tells Robbie the news that they will finally be performing on network, something that has always been a dream for him. However, the news doesn't seem to excite him. On the contrary, it triggers fears and an anxiety attack that makes him think he won't be able to handle such a large audience. His father doesn't listen to him and, while downing some drinks, simply tells him it's stage fright and that it will pass. No matter how much Robbie asks him to stay by his side, Peter ends up leaving. Drowning in substances, Roby avoids his mother's calls, who, along with Betty, now only sees him on TV, where he's being interviewed about his success. His addiction has consequences, one of which is that Nicole ends up kicking him out when she discovers he's been cheating on her and that he's an addict. Without a doubt, the great success he's starting to achieve is costing him dearly. Before heading out for one of his performances, Roby receives the news that his grandmother has passed away, a devastating event for him since Betty was always his unconditional support, even in the darkest moments. With a broken heart, Roby still goes out to perform, turning the song Angels into a tribute to his grandmother. After the burial, Roby continues to spiral out of control. When Nate visits him, he unleashes his anger on him, complaining that no one knows what it feels like to be in his shoes. The argument becomes hurtful, causing even his best friend to distance himself from him. Later, his father visits him. There, Roby takes the opportunity to confront him about his absence and accuses him of only showing up in his life because his grandmother forced him to. Peter tries to defend himself, claiming he's always been cheering him on from backstage, but Roby responds that he was there for Roby, not for Robert. When the moment arrives, Robert takes the stage at Network in front of 125,000 fans, a dream come true, where he deals with his stage fright and physically battles versions of his past self, including his childhood, trying to erase the painful memories that haunt him. After surviving all of that, he returns home, where he spends his days. Through a magazine, he learns that Nicole had a child with Liam, a moment that makes him reflect and decide to go to therapy to overcome his addiction. There, Roby confesses that he's emotionally stuck at 15 and that fame didn't solve everything, as he was always told. To heal, he begins to rebuild relationships with his old friends, as well as closing the chapter with Nicole and visiting his grandmother's grave, where they used to watch TV together with some chips. He also reconciles with his father, Peter, inviting him to sing alongside him. Despite everything he didn't get from his father as he wanted, he decides to close that chapter and prefers not to hold any resentment. It's an emotional concert where he faces all his past demons, but this time in a different way, showing that it's never too late to reconcile with oneself and with the past, closing the show with a final thank you to his grandmother, who always believed in him. And that's how this story ends.